Hello, friends, and welcome back to Sci-Fi Traveler. I have another very enjoyable story for you. Today, we'll be listening to the incredible story of Lucas and Seraphina. Grab your coffee and sit back. The story is about to begin. Enjoy the show, friends. The hall of the Korrestai could have swallowed a cathedral whole and still had room for the steeple. Lucas stood at the center of it, one small human in a borrowed diplomatic coat, beneath 10,000 soldiers arranged in silver rows, so precise they looked less like an army and more like a single organism deciding whether to sneeze. Above them all floated the dais, held aloft by no cable or column he could identify, just a slab of dark stone hanging in defiance of physics and good manners, and upon it, the Empress Seraphina. Her skin was a deep, arterial red, the color of garnet held to firelight, and it seemed to drink the glow of the torches rather than reflect it. Her ears tapered to elegant points. Everything else about her was unsettlingly human, which somehow made the difference worse. The brain kept insisting she was familiar, and then tripping over the parts that weren't. "You have crossed a great deal of empty space," she said, "to waste a small amount of my time." Lucas had been awake for 31 hours. He had rehearsed this for 41 days. The translation implant behind his ear hummed faintly, turning her words into his and his into hers, and it had developed over the journey what he privately considered a bad attitude. "Empress," he began, "humanity comes not as supplicants but as—" The implant rendered partners. It had, twice during practice, rendered it as snacks. He pressed on, grateful. "As neighbors who would prefer not to be set on fire." A sound moved through the silver ranks. It might have been amusement. With an army, it's hard to tell. The same noise precedes laughter and disembowelment. Seraphina did not smile. "Neighbors," she let the word hang. "Your species discovered the fold drive 11 of your years ago. You are children who have found the door to a house and assume the house is empty." "In fairness," Lucas said, "we knocked. You knocked on a star and asked it for trade rights. That was a misunderstanding involving a sensor array, and frankly, the star started it." Behind her throne, a general stood, vast plated, with the patient stillness of a landslide that hasn't decided to happen yet. His name, Lucas had been warned, was Theodore in the clumsy human approximation, and he had reduced 4 worlds to quiet. He was watching Lucas the way a cat watches a laser dot, certain it could be ended, merely waiting for permission. The negotiation ground forward. Seraphina parried everything. Every clause Lucas offered, she had already disassembled in her mind before he finished the sentence. Every concession he thought clever, she met with a boredom so refined it could have been bottled and sold. And yet, and he clung to this, twice when he said something genuinely unexpected, the smallest flicker crossed her face. Not warmth, something more dangerous. Interest. "You assume," she said, "that I have any reason to spare a world that offers me nothing I cannot simply take." "I assume," Lucas said, and here the exhaustion was a physical weight pressing on the back of his skull. The hall swimming slightly, 41 days and 31 hours, and the whole fragile future of his entire species balanced on the next words out of his idiot mouth. "I assume that taking is easy, and you have done easy things for a very long time, and you are bored, and that what I am offering you is the one thing your empire has never once handed you, which is something you did not have to conquer to receive. So please consider it, my dear." The implant translated it cleanly, perfectly, with horrible fidelity. "My dear." The hall went silent in a way the hall had never been silent. Not the disciplined hush of soldiers, but a deeper thing, a held breath 10,000 throats wide. The shifting spears stopped shifting. A guardsman's mid-step boot did not finish descending. And Theodore, the landslide, the ender of 4 worlds, froze with his armored hand halfway to the blade at his hip. Fingers spread, like a man who'd reached for a railing and found the railing reaching back. Lucas's tired brain helpfully supplied the thought, "Oh, that was probably not in the protocol manual." It hadn't been. He'd read the protocol manual twice. It had 900 pages on forms of address, and not one of them had been "my dear." And now he understood, in a cold rush, that this was precisely because no one wrote down the words that were either the deadliest insult in the language or the most naked intimacy it possessed. Because to write them was to risk saying them. Seraphina's eyes had changed. She rose slowly. The dais did not move, but she stepped off its edge and descended through the air on some unseen stair, one deliberate step at a time, red against the silver, and the army watched her come down the way you watch weather. She crossed the floor. She stopped close enough that he could see, beneath the imperial composure, something unguarded flicker and refuse to be put away. The army waited. She waited, and for one suspended heartbeat, neither the Empire nor the man had the faintest idea what had just changed. She studied him the way a surgeon studies an incision already made, no longer deciding whether to cut, only assessing the damage. Up close, her eyes were not the flat black they'd seen from across the hall, but a deep iron gray shot through with faint moving light, like storm clouds with traffic. "Do you know what you said?" she asked. It was not a question. The implant, sensing the gravity of the moment, declined to editorialize for once. "I have," Lucas admitted, "a developing theory." "Speak it." "My theory is that I said something with the approximate social weight of, 'Oh, removing my shoes in your throne room and asking which way to the kitchen.'" A muscle moved at the corner of her mouth. He chose to believe it was not the prelude to an order. "Closer than your 900 pages, manage," she said. And Lucas felt his stomach drop, because of course she knew he'd been issued the manual. Of course she knew he'd read it. She had probably written half of it and left the most important page deliberately blank. In the high tongue, there are 41 words for one who serves the throne, 60 for one who threatens it, and 1,000 for strangers. There are 2 for beloved. You reach past every wall my language builds and use the smaller of the 2, the one a person uses for someone they have decided to keep. The hall, 10,000 strong, leaned in without moving. "In my defense," Lucas said, "I was running on no sleep, one ration bar, and the kind of fear that makes a man honest. I would have set it to a vending machine if the vending machine had been negotiating the survival of my species." "You compare me," said the Empress Seraphina, ruler of the Korrestai, drinker of torchlight, "to a dispenser of snacks." "I compare the situation," Lucas said. "You, I would never insult by comparison to anything that takes coins." And there, it happened. Not a smile. Smiles were for people who hadn't ruled an empire long enough to know better. But something flickered behind her composure, and this time, lost. The corner of her mouth lifted, briefly, helplessly, and was hauled back into place by sheer imperial discipline. It lasted perhaps a third of a second. It was, Lucas would think later, the single most terrifying and exhilarating third of a second of his life, because 10,000 soldiers saw it too, and a sound went through the silver ranks that was unmistakably, catastrophically, the sound of an army not knowing how to feel. Behind her, Theodore finally completed the gesture his hand had abandoned. His fingers closed around the hilt of his blade. He did not draw it. He simply held it, the way a man holds a door he is not yet permitted to open. "Empress," the general said, and his voice was the grinding of tectonic plates negotiating a property line. "The creature has profaned the dais." "The human," Seraphina said without turning, "has done something no one in this hall has dared in 200 years, Theodore, which has surprised me. Sheathe your disapproval. It is louder than your blade." The general's jaw worked. Protocol exists to spare me from boredom and insult. I find I am presently suffering neither." She turned at last, and the full weight of her attention swung across the hall like a searchlight, and 10,000 soldiers found urgent reasons to be statues. "The petition is suspended, not denied, suspended." She looked back at Lucas, and the storm-gray eyes had decided something, though he could not for his life have said what. "You will dine with me." If she had announced his execution, the hall would have understood. Execution had forms. Execution had a manual. Dinner sent a ripple of pure structural panic through the assembled war host of the Korrestai, and a junior officer near the front made a small involuntary noise like a kettle realizing it has been left on. Lucas began. It was not an invitation. I was going to say I'd be delighted, he said, but I appreciate you removing the burden of choice. Very efficient. 10 out of 10 governance. She had already turned to go, the air folding into steps beneath her, but he caught it. The flicker again, fought and lost. The briefest betrayal of a woman who had not been spoken to like a person, only a person, in longer than she would ever admit. One thing, she said over her shoulder, ascending, if you call me my dear again at dinner, you will mean it. There will be no exhaustion to blame, no fear to hide behind. So choose your words, neighbor. The faint moving light in her eyes was almost amusement, almost warning, almost neither. I have decided to start listening to them. The dais rose, the army exhaled, and Lucas, alone at the center of 10,000 silver soldiers, discovered that surviving the throne room had somehow landed him somewhere considerably more dangerous, a dinner reservation. They took his coat, his translation implants, diplomatic protocols, and very nearly his nerve before they let him into the chamber. The implant they could not remove without surgery, but a thin attendant with worried eyes flicked something at it that stripped away the formal registers, leaving it to render only plain meaning. So that you cannot hide behind the language of treaties, the attendant murmured, almost apologetically. And Lucas understood this dinner was going to be conducted with the verbal equivalent of the safety rails removed. The room was small. After the hall, it felt like a confession. A single low table, a window that was not a window, but a slow-turning view of the planet's night side far below. City lights threaded across the dark like circuitry. 2 seats. No guards visible, which meant there were a great many guards he simply couldn't see, which was worse. Seraphina was already seated. Without the dais, without 10,000 soldiers arranging themselves into her punctuation, she was smaller than he'd expected, and somehow more, the way a fire looks bigger in a small room. Sit, she said, before you say something. I was going to compliment the view. The view is 1,000 kilometers of empire I have never walked through unaccompanied. She said it lightly. It did not land lightly. Sit, Lucas. He sat. He noticed she had his name correct. Not the clumsy Korrestai approximation, the real one, the human shape of it. He decided not to mention that he'd noticed. He was wrong about getting away with it. Her eyes flicked to his in a way, registering that he'd registered. A tiny, silent transaction of 2 people, each pretending to miss what the other had not missed. Food arrived by no hand he saw. The table simply decided to have food on it, dishes resolving out of some folded pocket of space with a sound like a held breath released. Lucas looked at a fruit that was regarding him back with what appeared to be 3 small eyes. It's not alive, Seraphina said. It's looking at me. It's decorative. Decorative things on my world generally don't maintain eye contact. Then your world lacks ambition. She plucked one, ate it whole, watched him fail to. You are stalling because you are afraid of the rule I set. Mean it or don't say it. You have spent the whole walk here deciding which. He had. She'd seen straight through the polite small talk to the man frantically rehearsing under it, and he felt the particular nakedness of being read by someone better at it than he was. Can I ask you something instead, he said, that isn't about the petition or the rule or whether this fruit is going to file a complaint? A pause. You may try. When was the last time someone in that hall called you anything that wasn't a title? The light moved in her eyes faster. She set down the second fruit she'd been holding. For a moment he thought he'd overstepped, that the unseen guards would resolve out of folded space the way the dishes had. And then she answered, and her voice had changed, had thinned to something that had been kept somewhere private for a long time. My mother, she said, before the throne. She called me a word that does not translate. It meant approximately, she frowned, hunting it, small storm, because I was loud and I arrived without warning, and I rearranged everything. A breath. She has been dead for 60 years. No one has used a small word for me since. Titles do not require a person. They only require a throne to point at. The chamber was very quiet. Even the planet below seemed to slow its turning. That, Lucas said gently, is the loneliest thing I've ever heard. And I once spent 8 months on a survey station with a man who narrated his own sandwiches. She laughed. It startled them both. A real one, surprised out of her, low and unguarded, and she pressed her fingers to her mouth as if to catch it and put it back, and failed. He narrated, and now the second bite. Every day, 8 months, I would have signed a treaty with anyone who promised to stop him. Is that, she managed, official human diplomatic history? It's classified. You're the first foreign power I've told. I hope you appreciate the gesture of trust. And just like that, the thing in the room shifted. Not gone. The stakes still there. 2 species and 10,000 soldiers, and a suspended petition still hanging over the small table like weather. But warmer, the ice off it. She looked at him as though recalibrating some instrument she'd been certain of. You are not what they sent me to refuse, she said quietly. No, Lucas agreed. I'm much worse. I'm sincere. They talk the way people do when both have decided, without saying so, that the official business can wait one more course. She asked about Earth, not its fleet strength or its full drive yields, which her intelligence already knew better than he did, but its small things. What the rain smelled like. Whether humans really slept in the dark on purpose. Why his species had invented 40 kinds of cheese before it invented peace. We're a people of strange priorities, Lucas admitted. We mapped the genome before we figured out how to fold a fitted sheet. There are households still at war over it. A fitted sheet, a rectangle of cloth with elastic in the corners. It cannot be folded. It can only be defeated and stuffed somewhere it won't be seen. He paused. I'm told your people have weaponized localized space. We can't put a bedsheet away. I want you to factor that into your assessment of the threat we pose. I am revising my fear of humanity downward by the moment, she said dryly, and ate another decorative fruit. And he was almost certain now that she ate them mostly to watch him refuse to. But the warmth had a horizon, and they both saw it coming. They will not allow this, she said at last, and the lightness left her like heat off stone at nightfall. My counsel, Theodore. They watched the Empress of the Korrestai smile in her own war hall at a human's joke, and that image is already moving through the corridors faster than I am. By the morning watch, there will be a question on the floor that no titles can answer. What question? Whether their Empress has gone soft or whether she has gone human, which they consider the same disease in 2 stages. She turned the iron-gray eyes on him, and the moving light in them was no longer amusement. Theodore will press for the petition's denial, not because your terms are poor, because mercy I am seen to give freely is mercy, they fear I will give again. An empress who can be moved by anyone. He will frame your survival as the first crack in a dam. And the alternative he prefers? He prefers 4 worlds made quiet, she said. Becomes 5. The fruit on Lucas's plate seemed less funny now. He set down his utensil with the slow care of a man who has just understood that the dinner was never the safe part, that he had walked out of a throne room full of spears into something with much sharper edges and softer lighting. So the smile cost you, he said quietly. Everything I let them see cost me. It always has. She stood restless and crossed to the window that was not a window, the night-side city lights turning beneath her like a circuit board cooling. Do you understand what you walked into, Lucas? You think you made one slip of the tongue, but the throne is a held position. The moment it is seen to bend, the bending becomes the only thing anyone looks at. I have spent 60 years not bending so that no one would test whether I could. She did not turn around. And then a sleep-starved diplomat called me a small word, and an entire hall remembered I was a person, and now I cannot make them forget it. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it, and the stripped-down implant rendered it bare. No diplomatic cushioning, just the thing itself. Don't be. Now she turned. It is the first true thing to happen to me in a long while. I find I resent how much I do not resent it. He stood too, because sitting felt suddenly like cowardice. Then let me give you something back. You said the smile cost you. Let me make it worth the price. Not the petition. That's terms, that's paper. I mean something they can't twist into weakness. He stepped closer, around the small table that had hosted the strangest dinner of his life. Give me until the morning floor. Let me stand in front of Theodore and your council and earn the thing I said by accident. If I can't, deny the petition, and I'll walk back to my ship and tell my people I failed with my own mouth, and you'll have lost nothing but one evening. But if you can, she said, you will have done something far more dangerous than survive. You will have made me right to listen. Is that so dangerous? She looked at him for a long moment, the planet turning behind her, 60 years of not bending held in the line of her shoulders. Lucas, she said softly, almost kindly, no one has been right at me in decades. I have forgotten what it does to a person. We will find out together, it seems. The morning floor was the great hall again, but daylight made it worse. The torches were gone. In their place, the ceiling had become a single vast pane of folded space showing the system's pale sun, so that 10,000 soldiers stood in cold, honest light with nowhere for a man's nerves to hide. Lucas had slept 4 hours and dreamed, absurdly, of fitted sheets. He took it as an omen and decided not to interpret which kind. Theodore had the floor when Lucas entered, and the general did not stop speaking, merely let his voice grow large enough to include the new arrival as evidence. And so the council asks not whether the humans' terms are favorable, Theodore was saying, but whether an empire that bends once will be permitted to stop. We have watched 4 worlds learn the cost of testing our resolve. Now a 5th world sends us a man who tests it with a word, and our Empress, the smallest pause, a blade turned so its edge showed, did not correct him. The hall did not move, but it listened the way a held breath listens. Seraphina sat the dais above it all, and her face had gone back to the garnet stillness of the first day. The person from the small room folded away somewhere none of them could reach. That, Lucas understood, was for him. She had armored herself so that whatever he did next would be his, unhelped, unsoftened. It was the most generous, cruel thing anyone had ever done for him. General Theodore, she said, the human wished to speak before the floor. Custom permits it. Custom, a flick of the storm gray eyes, permits a great deal when one has read the manual. A ripple of something through the silver ranks. Lucas stepped forward into the cold sunlight and the attention of an army, and his mouth, his treacherous, reliable mouth, opened. General, Council, Empress. He let the third word sit plain. Not my dear, not yet, maybe not ever, the rule still hanging over him, sharp as a wire. You're afraid she bent. I want to argue that you've got the physics backwards. Theodore's jaw set. Explain, human, before I lose patience with the novelty of your survival. You weaponize space. You fold it. You bend it. Your whole empire runs on the principle that the strongest thing in the universe isn't the thing that stays rigid. It's the thing that can bend without breaking and snap back harder. A rigid beam shatters under load. A folded one holds. He turned, slowly, letting it carry. You've built your entire civilization on the strength of the bend. And then you stand here terrified your Empress did the one thing your own science says is strong. The silence changed quality. He felt it. The difference between an army waiting to kill you and an army waiting to hear the rest. She didn't bend out of weakness, Lucas said. A weak throne can't afford to be seen as human. Only an unshakable one can. The fact that she let 10,000 of you watch her be a person and didn't flinch, that's not the crack in your dam, General. That's the dam telling you it's strong enough to have a window in it. Words, said Theodore, but quieter now, the landslide reconsidering its angle. Words are all diplomacy is. You do it with fleets. I do it with the only weapon my species ever got good at before peace, which is talking until the other person forgets they were going to hit us. A startled noise from somewhere in the ranks, quickly swallowed. I'm being honest because the implant won't let me be anything else. They took the lying out of it last night. So believe this is the true setting. I came here to beg. I stayed because she's the first ruler I've met who's lonelier than she is powerful. And I think an empire run by someone who remembers she's a person is an empire worth not being at war with. Theodore's hand drifted toward his blade. Old habit, the gesture from the first day, and stopped. Did not close. The general looked for the first time like a man weighing rather than deciding. "You ask us," he said slowly, "to call mercy strength. I ask you to call it physics," Lucas said. "You already believe in it. I'm just applying it to her." And on the dais, Seraphina rose, slowly as before, the air folding into a stair beneath her. But this time when she descended, she was not coming for him. She came to stand at the floor's center, between her general and her guest in the cold sunlight, where 10,000 soldiers could see every line of her face, and she let them see it. The armor came off in front of all of them, deliberate, chosen. "He is right," she said, "which is the most dangerous thing about him." She looked at Lucas, and the moving light was back in her eyes, and the whole hall held its breath to hear what an unbent empress would decide to be. "Hear my verdict," Seraphina said, and the hall arranged itself into silence around the words. "The human petition is granted, not as mercy, as treaty. Earth enters the fold accords as a neighbor, with all the rights and every one of the irritations that word implies. A pause dry as the deep space between stars. They will test our patience. They cannot fold a bedsheet. I have decided to find this endearing rather than alarming, and I advise the council to do the same." A sound went through the silver ranks. Bafflement, mostly the specific confusion of an army, informed that the great existential threat could not manage its own laundry. Theodore did not speak at once. The landslide stood at its own edge, weighing 60 years of quiet worlds against one cold morning of being argued into a corner by physics he himself had taught. When he finally moved, it was to take his hand fully off the blade and fold it behind his back. The Korrestai gesture, Lucas would later learn, that a soldier makes when he sets down an argument he has decided not to win. "The bend that holds," the general said gruffly. "I dislike that I taught it to him." "You taught it to the academy," Seraphina said. "He merely listened. It is a human failing. They listen to everything, even stars, even sandwiches." Her eyes cut to Lucas, glinting. "Especially sandwiches." "That's classified," Lucas said, to the entire war host of the Korrestai, and a junior officer near the front made the kettle noise again and was very pointedly not looked at by anyone. The hall began by slow degrees to remember how to breathe. 10,000 soldiers who had come to witness either a war or an execution discovered they had instead witnessed a treaty and a joke about laundry, and were not entirely sure how to file the morning. Lucas knew the feeling. He'd been filing it since yesterday. It was later, after the council had dispersed into corridors thick with the news, after the implant's diplomatic protocols had been ceremonially restored, and Lucas had asked them to leave the lying out anyway, that he found her again at the window that was not a window. The planet turned beneath, dayside now, oceans the color of nothing on Earth. And she stood watching it the way she'd watched the nightside lights, like a woman cataloging a kingdom she'd never been permitted to simply enjoy. "You bent in front of all of them," he said, "on purpose." "I did." She did not turn. "I have spent 60 years proving I could not be moved. It turns out the more frightening demonstration is letting them see that I can, and that the throne stands anyway. You gave me that. I am not certain I forgive you for it. I have that effect. My survey station colleague never forgave me for the sandwich thing either, and all I did was ask him to stop." She laughed. Easier this time, the surprise gone out of it, the sound of someone who had decided to allow herself the thing. Then she turned, and the iron gray eyes were serious under the moving light. "There is the matter of the rule," she said. He'd been waiting for it the way one waits for weather. "I remember the rule. At dinner I told you that if you said the small word again, you would mean it. No exhaustion to blame. No fear to hide behind." She studied him, and for once the Empress and the woman from the small room were the same person. No folding, nothing put away. "You have had a night and a morning. You are rested or nearly. You have won the thing you came for. There is no negotiation left that the word could serve. So if you said it now, it could only be the truth, which is precisely why I forbade it where it would have been cheap." The chamber was very quiet. The planet turned. Somewhere far below, two species were learning they would not have to grieve each other, And somewhere closer, a small storm of a woman waited to find out what a man would do with a word now that it could cost him nothing but honesty. Lucas thought about Earth, and the rain she'd asked about, and the long fold home, and the version of himself that had walked into this hall 30-some hours ago, certain he was going to fail with his own mouth. That man had been right about the mouth and wrong about the failing. He found he had changed somewhere between the throne room and the window, had stopped being a man who joked because he was afraid, and become, at some point he couldn't name, a man who could mean a thing and say it in the same breath. "My dear," he said, and the entire empire did not freeze. Only she went still. The good kind, the held breath kind, and then the corner of her mouth lifted and was not hauled back, not this time, and the small storm arrived without warning and rearranged everything, exactly as it always had. "There," Seraphina said softly. "Now you've done it on purpose." "I'm told that's the dangerous kind." "It is." She came to stand beside him at the window, the two of them in a turning world. "We will find out together, neighbor. We seem to keep agreeing to that." Well, friends, we've reached the end of another story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like. You can leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next story. See you in the next one, friends.